hugely active. I think it's still pretty active.
Yeah.
You're up there occasionally, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, but yes.
Let's see if this. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool.
Okay, so this has been documented, so it's in their portfolio.
Right. Is it recording? Yes, it's recording. Okay, so hi everyone. Like I mentioned earlier, my name is Jacob Hunwick. I'm a junior designer here in the ArtSciLab, and me and Cason are here to talk about like our relationship with each other and like the projects we've done. So I'll let him introduce himself, and then he's going to talk about a work scenario and how that relates to our subsequent discussion. Yeah. So hi everybody. My name is Cason Hunwick, and I go to UTDallas, and I'm currently a sophomore there. And I study chemistry. That's my major, and I have a minor in science communication. And so I work in a lab, in a nanochemistry lab, and I also work as a journalist, as a science and technology journalist at the UT newspaper, the Daily Texan. And so between these two groups, working in the lab and working as a journalist, we have a lot of weekly meetings, right? We get together and we're supposed to collaborate and come up with things that we couldn't come up with on our own. But I want you to imagine for a second one of those meetings with my journalist coworkers. Imagine you're on the UT campus and you're in the basement of Belo, and you're seeing us all sitting around a ping pong table, kind of hunched over our laptops, going about our meeting. And I want to remind you that the people at this meeting, the people that I work with, we all come from different majors. We have neuroscience majors, we have chemistry majors, and all those people are all different ages. They just ate at different dinners, and they have different friends. And some of them just want the meeting to be over as soon as possible so they can go and party. Some of them actually want to get something out of the meeting. What I want to point out is that between us, there doesn't seem to be enough similarity, enough connection to actually produce real collaboration. And during that hour, all we really do is kind of flounder and fail to articulate until our hour is up, and then we just go about our separate ways. And so I want to contrast this example of a meeting with Jacob and I's relationship in terms of collaboration. And I also kind of want to preface this presentation. What we'll be doing is sort of going through our kind of story and then present the project that we want to present later. So our minds process information in a way that we can collaborate seamlessly. We actually pick up on one another's like pitfalls, and we subconsciously fill in what's missing. And we add and combine to each other to reach a goal that we would not be able to achieve on our own. So that's something Roger would call necessary collaboration, and I think it's definitely a big part of what we do together. So in our presentation, we'll be talking about our relationship and our ability to collaborate and build off each other. But before we get there, we'll start with what nature gifted us, our genes. So Cason and I are monozygotic, which means we share all of our genes, so 100% of our DNA. We're known as nature's clones. And they're actually, so to contrast his discussion with his journalist work, we have no barriers. There's no barrier to communication. We collaborate seamlessly, and we process information very similarly. And another fascinating similarity about twins is actually the sort of composition of our brains, like kind of the neural connections. And there's this interesting visualization where we can see fraternal twin brains compared to identical twin brains. And they make a correlation in like the thickness of gray matter in those brains. And when you compare fraternal to identical twin brains, the identical brains are, show massive areas of correlation. And so that leads us to process and think in very similar ways. So our genes and our minds are similar, but how does that play out in our behavior? How does that, what can we tell you about this experience as people that live it? And honestly, it's kind of strange. And I'll give you an example. So I think this was 4 or 5 years ago. Jacob and I were at a movie theater, and I think we were watching the first Avengers maybe. And you can't talk during a movie, so we sat through the whole movie, didn't say anything to each other. And we walked out, and in unison we said two sentences in perfect unison. And the words sounded so alike that we actually had to look over at each other and be like, hey, wait, did you say that too? Because the words sounded so identical that we couldn't tell who said it. Another example is we took AP Physics 1 in high school together, and we got our first test back. No surprise, we got similar scores, but we also got the same incorrect answers, and then on the incorrect answers, we pick the same incorrect choice. And then on the free response, we use the same line of logic to reach either incorrect or correct deductions. And so this is kind of where we come to think about how do we actually describe ourselves. And I kind of think of it like we're sort of one composite entity, but we also have different perspectives, right? And that kind of led to this really interesting back and forth between Jacob and I, to where we started to actually specialize and realize that we could fill in where the other, could not perform. So instead of us actually having to master a whole suite of skills individually, we could sort of divvy things up. So that's our relationship. We act alike and intentionally complement each other's skill sets. Now let's talk about our story and how this affected our lives. We grew up in rural Michigan on 5 acres of forested land. And in this forest lay our house. We had a very large basement, complete with a cold concrete floor and a lot of open space, dark uninsulated walls. There was, Legos, toys, cardboard, open space, and we didn't have very many distractions, so it was just us in an open field of potential. And so we kind of asked, well, what can we do with the space, and what can we create with it? And so while, other kids were maybe mastering multiplication or hoping that their mom would let them stay over at someone else's house, we noticed that there was moss growing on our porch, and we took that moss and split it up and planted it in Tupperware containers, and then tried to figure out in our basement how little light and water it could survive with before it died. And then we decided to see how much chili pepper the moss could handle before it died. And so this is kind of an innate curiosity and this kind of interesting collaborative relationship. So naturally we became very fond of Legos. And the way I'll kind of give you a little bit of insight as to how our process worked there. And so Jacob was and is very good at sort of visualizing things in his mind, and so he was able to create the models. And Cason, on the other hand, likes to sort and create order. So I would ask him for a piece and he would go digging for it, and then I would put the pieces together. One Christmas we created a modular system for creating characters, and we actually created it's a modular system where you can add arms and a head and legs, and we created the entire cast of the Peanuts, like Snoopy, Lucy, all of them, and set it up on our dinner table for our parents' dinner party. And yeah, needless to say, they were kind of surprised. And another thing we did in our basement was we noticed that whoever started a ping pong match between us would actually have an unfair advantage. I wonder why. And so what we did is we used the same process, the same workflow to create a robot that actually launched the ping pong ball to start the game. And I could go on. Like there's just kind of these countless examples of us kind of collaborating and creating interesting inventions or projects.
What about your dream life? Do you ever have any weird dreams, shared dreams or anything like that?
That's a great. There's a lot of similarities that there's a lot. I'm sure if we tried
I mean, it's sort of curious.
Yeah, I don't think I have a discrete example, but I'm sure if we tried it, I'm sure there would be something. I'm sure we've had the same dream.
There's a neuroscientist named Sam Harris who has this podcast thing, and he believes that you're sort of an example of that. The idea that we all have of free will comes under question in this kind of.
Well, yeah, it does. And with twins that are the identical twins that are separated at birth.
Yeah, right.
And then
they both smoke cigarettes and they wear gingham and whatever.
They both have rubber bands around the same hand and 7 rings on the left hand. Yeah. And then they both like to sneeze in elevators when it's crowded to have everyone jump. That's a funny story. Yeah, there's a lot of those. Okay, so moving on with our story. At 11 years old, so we moved from rural Michigan to suburban Keller, Texas, which is north of Fort Worth. So this is when we started our first business. We made custom crafts we were like 11, 12. We made custom crafts in our game room and sold them to people. And this kind of just marked our transition into a new environment. Slowly we became social creatures, and the timing was right because we were about to move into high school. And so we made the transition into Keller High School, which is this big 70s style brick building in the concrete corner of Keller. And in fact, there's a lot of concrete in Keller. There's a lot of open sidewalks and open roads. And again, we asked, what can we do with this sort of open space, and what can we create? And so we started in high school, we started our second business, making longboards. And the way we made this business work was we called upon our roles that we had sort of built before, and we sort of specialized to make it work. So I ended up becoming sort of the woodworker, the person that sort of fabricated the longboards, and Jacob kind of took on painting and design. So we sold custom boards to our friends and neighbors, and we ended up, this business was a little bit more serious than the one I just mentioned. We ended up making a little bit more money, and we garnered some attention from the school newspaper and did an article and a video interview.
And you convinced me to buy 3 of them.
And I convinced Rod, yeah, I did. we also brought a board there if you want to check. Yeah, that's the newer one. So, oh yeah, so eventually the word kind of spread pretty quickly, and we did, get some attention. And eventually we had so many orders that we actually had to sort of shut down the business for a while. But quickly we realized that we missed having something to sort of, build and collaborate over. And so during the summer before senior year and kind of the end of junior year, I kind of wanted to investigate, what a brand is and how we create an identity for ourselves, rather than just being sort of a name and a logo and 2 twins working in the garage. How do we create an identity and a brand and link a mission to it that can help others? And the first step in doing that was actually creating a new logo, which Jacob's going to go into now. So this is one of the boards we made, just an example. So my methodology for creating the first logo was basically put everything that was in the business on a page and then arrange it until it made sense. So there's me and Cason, and then a board, and then twin boards, right? So I've kind of tried to evolve from that, and that's why I'm working in design. So this is the new logo. I wanted to create my own visual language to communicate our message through, and I think Cason's reaction was pretty yeah, I told him that logo fits exactly what I imagined in my mind, and it kind of gives me hope in a way. And it also, I like this logo in particular because you'll notice this sort of open space, and whatever you lay the logo on, whatever is in the background now becomes part of the logo. And that to me kind of represents us. Like no matter what we do, no matter what problem we attack, it kind of becomes part of who we are. So there's a lot of different ways to interpret a logo, and this one's not exactly, the pinnacle of our presentation or anything, but I think Cason's reaction to what I was doing and how he really got on board with like the message I was portraying with this logo, because we share the message. I think that's one really important thing that I wanted to achieve with design, which is creating a visual language to convey a message. And that message for our business now is to help other young people like us that have talents, right? So whether it's maybe they're taking photographs, maybe they're painting, making music, take those talents and kind of get rid of the logistical barriers that they find, right? And we basically team up with other people that may be struggling and kind of use our perspective to sort of help them and assist them. And I do have a couple of examples. There was one person, Logan Schmidt, who is I think in high school now. He kind of reached out to us and asked, like, he wants to help us with our business. And we gave him an opportunity to make photographs and make edits for our business and do sort of advertising for it. And now I think he has, his own personal website for his photography, and he's trying to get hired as a photographer. But we noticed that we have this kind of ability to sort of like consult with young people that are either struggling or they see too many logistical barriers, to where we can actually assist them and make their talents actually be able to be monetized. So that's the mission. Like that's the mission of Twin Boards.
Of
that's
that
what
company.
we're trying. Yeah, of that company.
So we'll recap. So the transitions we've gone over. First, we moved from rural Michigan to suburban Keller, Texas, and you can see what we did with that open space. So now we're transitioning from high school to college, and this kind of new gap has opened up between us, this separation. So I'm at obviously UTDallas and he's at UT Austin.
Yeah, and so for so long, for more than 19 years, really, we were completely inseparable, right? Like I wasn't, in a different room than him for more than 12 hours. Like we were completely inseparable. But this transition from high school into college kind of marked the end of that proximity. So it marked the end of being able to look out and always see the other looking back. And so it kind of opened up a space that wasn't in our environment, but it was actually between us. And so now, finally, after 19 years of being a twin,
we actually see the space between us, and we're actually able to realize, like, hey, we might have this really interesting working relationship that's, you know, part of psychological studies, it's part of, you know, clinical psychology. It's twins are a very integral piece of science. You know, we're just kind of like a fluke. So we finally kind of realized, you know, we might be able to like contribute something.
So this leads to our next project, one where we explore the unique relationship we have and the one we've been talking about. So we're trying to run an experiment and ask, how might us exploring our relationship as twins have an impact or help someone learn about something? So how can we present ourselves as we are naturally so others might understand what it's like to be a twin? The idea is to create a digital place where we can share our story and put our perspectives on full display.
Are you filing an IRB
With each other.
to experiment on
Shake
yourselves?
hands and that's it, yeah.
Are
Yeah,
there
we're
any
just like-
ethical issues in your project?
I hope not. I don't think so.
And so anyways,
It's self-induced.
to kind of to kind of end this sort of discussion, this formal discussion, then we'll kind of get into the project and what we're thinking about doing, what we're hoping to do, and hopefully we can get some feedback from some of you. We really hope that our journey to help, you know, understand us as twins can help humanity understand itself just a little bit better.
So by looking at each other, so so some names for this project.
Yeah, so we're still trying to think of a name. We're still trying to think of like what, you know, form this would take. But we know that it's going to be a website where both of our perspectives are featured. So, for example, we might do something where a third party writes maybe a prompt to write about maybe something like identity or humanity or collaboration. And then we each have to write about that topic on our own, separate, you know, not consulting with each other, and then just kind of post the result and have people be able to see what are these different perspectives able to kind of showcase. And so yeah, we have a bunch of different names that we're kind of thinking about doing. Exactly the names.
Okay,
So,
so it so
yeah.
happens, and unfortunately Alex isn't here, that we have a project called Hermes in the lab.
Right.
And Cassini original degree was in classics, so Osiris caught my attention.
Yeah.
But then you have to know a little bit of classics to know who.
The plus side to using a term not as many people are familiar with is you can sort of put your own meaning to it.
Yeah.
So some problems with using, I'm trying to think of some name we didn't want to use. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not. But yeah, so
Just
we're
some
trying-
like cliche term, like, you know.
Yeah.
in
Identical minds or something
twin
like that.
tuition.
Tweedledee and
Yeah,
Tweedledum.
so we're trying to stray away from that. Yes.
So is this trying to connect two different people based on interest of, like neurological interests? And because I mean the immediate thing that I'm thinking is like, well, Tinder does that, so does OkCupid, so does
Oh, yeah.
you know, dating websites. So then what would be the emphasis? Is it for collaboration? Is it for thinking? Is it for finding like a career partnership?
So one thing, yes, partly. So the audience of the actual audience of the website wouldn't be like casual readers. It's more of like a portfolio piece and a self-reflection tool. But I think maybe looking back, like let's say in 20 years, I don't know what we're gonna be doing, but we kind of look back at it, and one of the kind of like messages we kind of want to convey with this project is that so one cool thing that we can do as twins is, instead of looking in the mirror and saying like, trying to train your gut feeling to sort of say, oh, this is where I need to be, and see yourself there, I can literally see myself there, because I'll just call him and be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I feel like I'm in a rut, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. So I think to answer your question, like, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly, but like, we've kind of thought about like how this might be applied. And one way it might be applied is going back to what I was talking about earlier about being at the meeting, talking about collaboration, right? And one way we kind of work together already is we sort of introduce to people like kind of a new way to collaborate and a new way to sort of like set aside communicative barriers and realize that there's, you know, you're more similar than you are different.
Right.
And kind of using that realization, you can kind of like come together to better collaborate and better attack a problem rather than get stuck in these communicative barriers. Does that answer your question? I'm not.
Yeah. I guess would it use like an algorithm to determine and find like a kinship with somebody?
Oh, it would just be us. Oh, yeah, it would just be us.
Or
yeah, possibly other sets of twins, but not just anybody. Yeah.
Okay.
This is like a very like personal blog kind of thing.
That's what I was curious.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
Was it,
Yeah,
was it,
sorry.
Yeah,
Great.
like just
Sorry.
twins, or was it to like
Yeah,
the
just
whole?
like the URL right now is jacobcason.com.
Yeah.
So it's like just
And it would
us
be
right now.
us replying to prompts. And then another thing we might want to do is like actually be able to visualize this relationship. So actually understand that we have our unique perspectives. Most people often just see us as like kind of in
I see.
tandem.
Yeah.
I see.
It's
Yeah.
We've never tried to articulate this before, so
Yeah,
it's
so
like
it's
very much
difficult.
in our mind
Yeah.
what we're thinking.
Got it.
So these questions are very useful.
Okay, so this is, okay, go ahead.
So I was gonna say, I think maybe a deeper question or thought that may come from this is, how can you teach people to collaborate by getting to know each other and understanding each other's weaknesses and strengths? And so if I understand where your weaknesses are, then I can help focus on your weaknesses where you can focus on mine. So while we're collaborating, we can actually get something done.
Right. That's it. So that's a great point, and that's what we hope people will take out of this.
Okay.
Is we hope that they will, kind of read our story and hear about us, and hopefully we can inspire in people that, looking at us, studying us, you can learn something about humanity, and that might be one of the things we hope
Okay,
they learn.
so Ivantina just snuck in.
Just snuck in, yeah.
He got no sleep last night because he's finishing his essays for his PhD qualifier. So thank you for sleepwalking here.
Yes.
But Ivan happens to run the project that we call Creative Disturbance, which is an intellectual dating service. And we tried Tinder software and all those kind of that software, and it's useless. And so we're trying to build Brainder, but we don't know how to do it. Brainder.
So y'all
So-
don't use like IQ tests or anything?
So how do you twin yourself? Well,
Twin yourself.
with someone who has enough in common that you can work together, but you
that's
actually.
a great, whoa, yeah. Because I was actually about to start working for a startup accelerator.
Yeah.
And one of their things is like, hey, you should come and like, join our little like office building, and maybe you'll find like a, someone
Yeah.
that can like co-run your business. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So,
Like a
and-
personality test.
Sorry?
Like a personality test.
Yeah, but Scott, I don't think we'd be compatible if we took a personality.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But we successfully collaborated since 2011.
Yeah.
And we have enough in common that we're really motivated to work together.
Yeah.
But
we've been marginally successful even.
In contrast to that relationship, y'all feel like y'all's is seamless, whereas you have two different personalities that, despite differences, have blended together well to produce awesome content. So, from the research that you hope to do you have to? I guess is your hope that you could give people some insight to seeing that if you have some kinship to people, that maybe you would produce better work? And maybe like if you have differences with people, how could those people work together?
Yeah, so when we were kids, I used to like just beat him up and then sit on him. So like, no, we were not, it's not always seamless, but I
Yeah.
think like by articulating it and talking about it, we can understand like how it has become so like
Who's older?
good. I'm older by 6 minutes.
No wonder you can sit on.
That's right.
Okay, so one of the things that Scott and I struggle with, and we had a power breakfast this morning, is defining shared expectations while having different purposes and goals. And it's really difficult, right? So, we can agree to work on something and agree on what we're working on, but if we don't even know what, and we don't have the same success criteria, right?
Well, we share success criteria.
Oh, anyway, so,
sometimes.
but it's, finding that shared part of the territory, we
What-
don't agree on a lot of things, and that's fine.
Well, you'll want to do this because you guys want to keep it interesting, right? And I think that's really one of the defining things for Roger and I too, in terms of collaborating.
Yeah, and so one of the discussions we get in is, it's one thing to collaborate with people you see every day, but how you collaborate with people on a different time
Yeah,
zone
and
is
you
a
guys are,
whole.
and also
Well, you're in the same time zone.
But you're at a
Suddenly-
distance.
I kind of like this name because it's like.
Yeah, I did too, actually, out of all
Because
those, yeah.
if
Spooky
you know,
action at distance.
right? So you have two particles, you can
Yeah,
entangle
yeah,
them,
yeah.
and then if you separate them,
It's
They're
the one that
independent.
Einstein
yeah,
exactly.
couldn't
Spooky
accept.
action at a distance.
Yeah,
so.
spooky action at a distance.
So maybe that's the subtitle. But
Spooky
another,
action at a
another.
Yeah, that is the
possible-
subtitle, for sure.
Yeah, that would be a good subtitle. Another possible area where this could be is like behavioral science.
Yeah.
So people study twins in depth, but it's never really about twins that are together. It's always twins that have differences.
Ah.
But our similarity has shaped our individual identity to an extent where we're entangled. Like, if I
Yeah.
didn't know him, I wouldn't be who I was. If he lived somewhere else, I'd be a completely different person. Maybe I'd be a chemist and a journalist, right? So it's like, we need to explore the entire picture in order to understand what's actually going on. Because like, in nature versus nurture, we kind of like intuitively feel that it's just very incomplete, because by studying twins that are separated, that's not the only thing you can do. Right?
What about psi research? Have you looked into any of the stuff, like what is it, the thing at Duke, I can't remember, but there's a guy named Dean Radin, for example, that I worked with back in the 90s that pretty much clinically confirmed, although, there are certainly skeptics that don't want to have this confirmed, that
Right,
you
taboos.
can sense when someone's looking at the back of your head.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
You know about him,
behavioral
right?
science is always I don't know. But
Oh,
I've
well,
heard
Dean
that's
Radin,
interesting.
anyway, he has a series of tests that might be interesting for you guys to do at a distance.
Oh,
Maybe
I
at the
see
same
what you're saying. I
time,
see what you're
or
saying.
something like that. And
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
like
We've also
what-
thought about like what's an interesting like test we could take, or like
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
like something we could recreate that would be like whoa, like
Or
actually
just do
show-
the same side test and see if your
Yeah,
results.
that's great. Yeah, that's something we've
been
been thinking about too. Like we were thinking about maybe taking like
just to see how
Yeah.
quantumly entangled you actually are.
yeah, that's
There,
interesting.
there are some cognitive tests that you guys can do, like play arcade games and see who wins. Then you'll know whose number processing is good. Then you'll play a first-person shooter. Then you'll know who's.
Oh.
Reaction times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna.
Oh,
first
yeah,
person-
yeah.
First person.
It's
point
gonna
of
be.
view.
It's gonna be
You've broken
insane.
the rule.
That's predictable.
That's
right.
So you can map your cognitive skills and see
They're gonna be
who's
exactly the
lacking.
same.
Okay, so I
can
have
I tell you that it's gonna be the
That's
same.
a good idea. That's a good
So
idea.
would y'all have the
Those are
same
both good.
reaction times?
Yeah.
Like, do y'all compete
I mean,
against-
unless I
Did you ever
get
play
enough sleep
Mario
for the last-
Karts together?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
like-
Okay, so when we started chatting earlier, I told you that Einstein's best friend was called Besso.
That's
And when he was coming up with the ideas for general relativity, he used to go walking through the forest in Switzerland, actually, talking about these crazy ideas. And he credits Besso at some point to become a co-creator. I mean, Besso was a high school teacher, I think. He wasn't a scientist. So we submitted a funding proposal to the Keck Foundation to create a virtual Besso. So maybe you could create an app where the two of you can think aloud together as you're walking through the forest, and just
That's
part of the idea is, you'd be walking down the beach, you'd notice something, and you'd
Mhm.
say to Besso, "It's funny, that wave's behaving. I think it's doing something that my theory would predict." And then Besso, who had been with Einstein for 19 years, would say, "Oh yeah, remember we were on that beach over there and we saw the same wave." And so maybe you could do a virtual Besso.
That's a cool name.
In programming, this is rubber duck programming, which is less dignified than Einstein and Besso, but
What is that?
rubber duck programming.
So what's that?
You sit and you have a rubber duck next to your computer, and when you
Oh,
get stuck,
yeah.
you tell the rubber duck about your problem, and you explain it to the rubber duck.
But the rubber duck doesn't reply.
It doesn't, but suddenly you have the answer.
Right, so this rubber duck would talk back to you and remember what you did 6 months ago?
There is a way of making rubber ducks talk back to you. They're just not very intelligent.
The thing is,
I've never had a rubber duck.
have you
talk
seen
back.
this hack? This reminds me.
Use your rubber duck wrong.
Have you seen this hack
That
of
wasn't
Alexa
words,
where
it
you can
was just
put it
a
on really
noise.
fast?
Well, that's the fine speech
Those
now.
talking.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
That's
I
off topic, but
I was
fun.
curious if y'all ever like record anything, and then like maybe like you record your day or you record your day and journal it,
Yeah.
and then compare.
Yeah, so another idea would be like, again, we were thinking about doing like a kind of a video phase, and one thing, this is kind of a general idea, but like, you know, documenting our own perspectives and then having a third perspective kind of document what we're doing. So like, for example, we would do something like each wear a GoPro, and then, you know, we both like playing soccer, and actually like in high school they wouldn't let us play on the same teams because like we played they call it the Hunwick connection, so they wouldn't let us play on the same team.
We would absolutely annihilate
Yeah,
people.
like
Oh,
in
cool.
practice.
The two
in
of you would
practice.
just
Yeah, it is
take the ball
not
all the way
fair.
down. Just
Yeah,
like
but
that.
to us it's like, well, duh, like it's easy to pass. Like if you have two people, you always beat one, like, you know, a whole team.
Right.
So like yeah, an idea would be to kind of show that we each have our own perspective, and that there's like, I don't know, it's hard to articulate.
Overlapping
Yeah, so like
perspectives.
for example, we would both be wearing GoPros, and then we would just kind of document
But-
us playing soccer,
And then the two videos would overlay.
or having them like next to each other,
That
and
would
then
be
having
sweet.
maybe
Maybe
a
you
third
could do
one.
like
I like the kind of like maybe like a vlog kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that idea too, or just like opening a door.
But
Like,
that
I
would
don't
just
know.
that would just be like frighteningly similar mannerisms. That wouldn't really be as, I guess that would be behavioral, but not really.
You got me thinking
You
of,
should
like-
let someone other than
Yeah,
you
that's
two
exactly what
document
we-
your
That's-
documents.
Yeah.
That's a great idea too. Yeah, we actually have like
we were gonna
Because
do that.
You guys
Mhm.
have too much implicit bias to
Yeah,
each
Exactly.
other.
Yeah, that's like the
You
hardest
won't be able
part.
to find.
You have the same biases.
Which is
Yeah.
that's what I think is interesting, right? Like that's why we're doing it. Like
Yeah.
people don't really try to talk about people that were raised together and then like what that did. They only talk about like separate.
But no, that's a great point, is having like implicit bias. We actually had a third person involved with this, like our friend Ryan. Like, you know, we spoke this because like honestly, when we first did this speech, it made no sense. It only made sense to us, so we had to like, you know,
refine it.
Yeah.
And explain.
It was it's still really hard. Like we still are probably not communicating every part of it, but again, like, you know, coming up with like the prompts and the ideas for
You
what
do
we're
have
gonna do.
different noses. There must be nature and nurture.
For the noses.
Maybe it's 'cause I was
You have
sitting
two
on
different
so much.
personalities. I mean, your hairstyle versus your hairstyle is different.
Did you guys ever see Dead Ringers, the Jeremy Irons film, where he plays an identical twin? It's a really creepy movie.
Sounds like I'd like that.
Arnold, was it?
What?
Was it
Dead,
Arnold?
Dead Ringers.
Dead Ringers.
It's really super creepy, and when you watch it, you'll go like, "Ugh."
It's true. It's
That
true.
guy,
You're
right.
right.
But I didn't make the film. It's a Cronenberg
Yeah,
film.
very
Okay,
good.
we've got about 10 more minutes to go, so how much more do you want to bend our ear? Keep going if you have some more slides.
Did
No,
you
we
ever?
don't even
Did
realize.
you
Yeah,
have?
it's-
Did you ever have a moment?
We could talk about the names.
Like the
Yeah.
end of that movie where you did. Was that a weird, anomalous moment when you did the simultaneous talking after the Avengers movie, or?
Yeah, that was freaky.
I mean, it never happened again though, or you
So-
never.
so when you-
you can't remember
See,
all
well,
the
like
words,
actually,
yeah.
okay. So here's something kind of funny. When we were walking here,
Yeah.
we have the same exact gait. So like
Yeah.
sometimes I'll look at his feet and kind of like walk
Mess
a
it
little
up,
different.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We do stuff like that all the time. It's intent. The thing is, it's intentional.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to be different from him, but how can that be constructive? And that's why we do things together like seamlessly.
Well, I think this. I mean, I referred to Sam Harris. I think there's some other stuff, but this stuff about free will and neuroscience
There's a lot
might
of
be,
range.
you know, like a kind of a place that you could get like a kind of academic backing for what you're looking for.
Yeah, and then like a thing with free will is like there's so many, you know, confounding variables in this. It's like, how do we isolate
Yeah,
our
right.
activity, and that's the difficult part.
Well, that's why the site test might be a good one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a
Those are
specific question
purposely
for the
made to
Pearl
be
Lab here.
extremely simple.
Yes.
Right.
So.
Or just even flipping a coin
So
at
when
the
you
same
put
time.
together
Yeah,
a team,
something
You
like
know,
that,
at a
yeah.
distance over, you know, FaceTime.
Flipping the coin.
Yeah, it might be simple activities too that would like reveal the most. I don't know.
Do you ever play rock, paper, scissors and have it be very?
Oh no, that's such a mind game. Like, oh my god. I don't know.
That's well. I mean,
Okay, so
that's
I have a
good.
different question. So in the Pearl Lab, you have groups of people working on the same project. How do you go about matching them?
It's self-organizing. It's entirely self-organizing. Frequently, it's interest-based, so people with a common interest will come together.
Subcluster.
Will meet together for a project. I've never seen the case where someone is turned away from a project that they're interested in.
So the shared interest is.
So the shared interest drives it.
Okay, so, hang on. So let me verbalize something which, you know, I'm now a little bit obsessed about. So there is a bit of research literature that shows that heterogeneous teams come up with ideas that homogeneous teams don't come up with. So if you take the forbidden person's cabinet of 70-year-old white men, surprise, surprise, they separated mothers from their infants. If the cabinet had been heterogeneous, it would never have happened, right? Because all the mothers around the table in the cabinet room would have said, you know, you can't do that.
I would like to believe that's true.
Well, no, anyway, there is a research literature, and so this group is 1 woman and 12 men.
I didn't even realize that.
No, so why is it?
So the research says that when there's 17% women in the room, people think that it's 50-50.
Yeah, right, I read that.
And when it's 33%, they think the women are outnumbering the men. It's the same if they're speaking. So if women speak 33% of the time, they think that they're talking over the men.
That's interesting.
Right. So we
So
have
interesting, 'cause I was
2
curious.
black people, 2 brownish people. So, you know, color of skin wise, we're sort of heterogeneous. Now, it's not a formula, it's not a recipe, right? So just by putting different people in a bag and shaking it up, it doesn't mean you're going to come up with a good idea. You take the Dalai Lama and a Nobel Prize winner, which I saw on the stage together, and let me tell you, they had no good ideas.
yeah?
Well, I mean, the Nobel Prize winner and the Dalai Lama are just...
What was the Nobel Prize in?
No, it was they were put on stage in one of these creativity conferences, blah 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 blah. Dalai Lama and Nobel Prize winner, and they
So
was
was it a peace prize or was it like a?
no, it was a
Physics prize?
physics prize or something. So,
I mean, I think it might matter, right? Like that's.
so in this case, I mean, you're so homogenous as a duo. Does that mean you'll never come up with certain ideas?
I mean, I actually kind of thought about that like, on the way over here a little bit, because like I did reference my like work environment, and like right now we have like 7 neuroscientists, and they end up coming up with the same story pitches for like a journalist article, and that's like, you know.
Well, I think we probably realized at an early age that that's not the best way to think, so that's why we kind of selectively, like, okay, if he's gonna do this, like, I can do everything he can do at the same level, but I just decided not to because we needed to branch
You
out.
both went to a UT campus.
Right. I mean, it is really similar, but it's
Like,
Well, I
different
mean,
fields.
you know,
They don't have the same haircut.
To point out how we're like we do have heterogeneous thinking is like this presentation itself. Like I was the one that actually gave it like the narrative arc about our story because like I'm interested in like PR, right? And so I was like, oh, we have to have some sort of like
a pitch.
Yeah, like some kind of like story that's like, you know, interesting or personal. And he's the one that kind of came up with
Okay,
like.
Scott has to go to a party that I'm going to soon, so.
Yeah, I'm just packing because I have
Oh.
like huge
Um,
Wind it down.
Okay, so you just gave a pitch.
monster computer.
If we gave you $1 million, what would you do with it?
Oh, that's
Give
a
it
good
back.
Okay, that's a really good answer. Thank you.
Thought about that. Thought
Scott,
about that.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
I don't happen to have $1 million handy.
Well, just
I don't know what
happens
to do
that
with
my
it.
house is worth
What would I
that.
do with $1 million? It would ruin my life. No, I'm just gonna give it back.
Well, except one,
Dude,
but you have startup companies. So what?
Well, if in reference to this project,
And you and
no,
your
but-
problem is
Yeah,
that
I don't think this is a $1 million thing.
no.
They succeeded so well, so
Skateboards,
many
maybe.
skateboards,
Yeah.
you had to close down the goddamn company.
It's working for you.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess another thing I'd point out is like we don't usually do things to like, I don't know, it's not like a means to an end. We usually do something so that'll lead to something else, right?
Yeah.
Like I was